So alongside comparing Kama Avenger to Space Ishtar, a lot of people have been asking for Musashi Berserker being compared to her as well, because these are essentially going to be the staples for the arts farming meta, because you'll have Space Ishtar and Kama with their big, thick, juicy batteries, and then you'll just have Musashi over here for raw NP gain. Plus, she is a Berserker, so she actually is super effective against pretty much everything in the game, whereas Kama and Space Ishtar are just neutral against everything in the game, so she still does have value in that aspect. But if you enjoy FGO content, make sure you give this video a like and make sure you subscribe to the channel, as it really does help me out. If you really like what I do, you can click that join button to become a channel member. And other announcement, whenever I do any of these versus videos, do keep in mind that this is just my opinion on who I prefer. If I say that Musashi's better, then you're still at liberty to use Kama Avenger all you want. If I say Kama Avenger just takes a big fat dookie all over Musashi over here, then you're still free to use Musashi. Use whoever you want, basically, because most of this content in the game can be cleared with whatever teams you want to use. You can get pretty creative in this game. It's part of the reason I like it so much. But obviously, I'm going to come out here and compare some servants and be like, I think this servant poo-poo stinkies on this servant. But again, just remember that you can use whoever you want, regardless if I say they're good or not. I could say Guile's caster is bad, which I do think he's bad, but if you just really like him and you grind him to level 100, then pop off, I guess, and you just enjoy using that, man. So with that out of the way, let's just go ahead and talk about these two and kind of compare them. And now, I've already done a video on Kama Avenger, and then I've already compared her to Space Ishtar, so hopefully by this point you guys know what she does. But just a quick refresher: she's got a very solid arts buff that's like 30% for 3 turns, 20% NP damage for 3 turns. She has the 2 dodge, the ability to slap charm on all enemies, so she can do one really big high damage NP turn because her NP gives her overcharge damage against charmed enemies. She also has this heartfelt blaze buff with a 50% battery. Just generally a very, very solid servant. And then we have Musashi. Now, Musashi ain't got any of the batteries like the other arts farming servants. Instead, what she has is just big, thick, fat, juicy NP gain. And this is like really the only skill you need to focus on when you're using Musashi, because this is all you really care about. You just slap on that 50% NP gain, and she loops really well because since she's a Berserker, she's going to probably like kill the enemy pretty quick, fast, and in a hurry. Means she's going to be getting more overkill, which means more NP refund, and any NP refund she gets is going to be going ooga booga booga, because she has this in conjunction with someone like Castoria. Just for reference, I was basically farming with a friend's Musashi with 1 Castoria, and it was going pretty good. And I was sitting there like, man, imagine if I had double Castoria with this chick. I would probably have to, never worry about farming ever again, because like Musashi is very good in that aspect. And that's kind of what this comes down to, because they're both decent when it comes to harder content. I would still give the edge to Kama because she has the whole, the coup dodge skill and the ability to slap on an AoE charm to the entire enemy party. So she really has 2 ways to keep herself alive. Whereas Musashi over here has the 1 hit of evasion. Granted, it is, not restricted to turns or anything. It's 1 hit of evasion that you need to get back every 4 turns. But I'm sure if anybody's ever used Scotty and used Scotty's NP, that's really useful for negging an NP and really not much else, because you're gonna get tagged with that, and then you're like, well, now I'm a Berserker and I have no hardline defense. I almost feel like this should have been on Kama, and not Kiara, but Musashi over here should have gotten the coup dodge skill, right? Because she needs it even more, because she's a Berserker. She's gonna die in like 2 or 3 hits. So it's like they maybe should have given her that. And then they gave her a guts over here, but the issue I have is that it's a little counterintuitive, because she's sapping like a third of her HP, well, actually more than a third of her HP, but she's sapping a giant chunk of her HP away to get herself a guts, which seems a little, counterintuitive. Maybe it's something that could be cool if they want to buff this in the future, is that whenever her guts procs, maybe she gets an additional buff. Like maybe she gets like 50% NP damage for one turn when her guts procs, or she gets like a 50% arts mana burst when her guts procs. Because if that was the whole game plan, like, oh, lower her HP so the guts has an easier time procking to then give me another buff, I would kind of be okay with that. But this is just like tanking your HP so then your guts can proc, so then congratulations, you used your survivability. It's just kind of like, I don't really know about that one, Chief. This does give her like a decent attack buff, and it does technically double buff herself in a way, if you want to think of it that way, because she's buffing her attack by 30%, but then she's lowering all enemies' defense by 30%. So this is like double buffing herself. And then they gave her a little bit of utility when it comes to harder content, because she has the Pierce Invincibility, which you're not really going to get out, any use of that when you're farming or anything. But if you're taking her to harder content, this basically means she can bypass any dodges or invincibility skills that any bosses would have. And that's just a very good skill to have, to be able to, bring that and not have to worry about like slapping on an appropriate CE or something like that. So that does make her pretty good. And again, she does have uses in harder content because she's a berserker. She's an AoE berserker. So you can just, bring her to just clean up a bunch of trash mobs in a fight, or just have her be your main DPS. It just is clearing out a bunch of people, because she's always going to have type advantage basically against everything in the game, save for like 2 classes or something. But she should be like really, really good. But it's just like, I think the issue is that most people, including myself, are just going to prefer the servant that has the battery, because that makes them a bit more flexible. So while, yeah, I think Musashi is insane as a looper, right? Like, she is like, you loop quick, fast, and in a hurry, right? It's so easy and casual to do with her. The problem is, kind of getting her to that initial battery. Castoria does give 100% between both of her buffs, and so you might be able to argue that, like, okay, well, Castoria, you slap on, any CE onto Berserker Musashi, the Castoria is going to do 100%, and then because Musashi is just such a good looping servant, now she's got like, what, that would give her like 90% NP gen, plus all the arts buffs she's getting. It's like she's going to loop pretty easily. And you're like, oh, I'm just going to get to 100%, so I don't need to like worry about, missing an extra 20% or something here and there. But it's just like, you could get that. I think it does depend though on your NP level and then what CE you're using, because I do think that is a feasible strategy because of how much NP gain she has. But then what it also comes to, just the utility of somebody having a battery when it comes to harder and difficult content, and just being able to pair them easier with certain CEs, the starting 50% CEs. I think that also just gives Kama a lot of utility. And I think it just gives her that like how would I describe it? It's just like that added bit of value, and that she can be deep into a boss fight or something, and you could just have those moments where you're like, man, if I could fire my NP, I can get my thing now. I could win immediately, basically. And then you get the battery and you win. Like, in fact, that just happened. We were doing the Eric Blood Axe challenge quest over on the NA version, and just got my Kentucky Rider battery back at the exact moment I needed it to like fire off my final NP and win the match. Whereas like if I was using someone else, like, I don't know, I know Ushi's not comparable, but I'm just saying another like single target quick rider that didn't have a battery, I would have just lost there, or I would have had to use a command spell. But we don't use command spells around here because we're manly men, all right? We don't need to resort to using magical tricks, all right? But yeah, I think Kama just overall is going to have more utility and more value when it comes to a lot of fights, because when we're talking about boss fight, I think that's also when Kama kind of like doesn't bridge the gap, but widens the gap between the two of them, because she's going to function better in challenge quests because her survivability is better. Her arts multiplying into her NP gives her very consistent damage without having to sack 5,000 of your HP just to get your attack buff. Then she also has this like really insane ability to do like massive damage on one turn. Like, just keep in mind, like, her damage numbers are fine. I believe they're lower than Berserker Musashi's actually before her buff procs. But actually, let me pull up the AoEs. Actually, oh, never mind. They're actually comparable. Ooh, that's actually never. I actually thought you were way higher. Maybe I'm probably no. I'm thinking of Space Ishtar. That's what I was doing. I'm still on yesterday's video. I'm sorry, dudes. But no, that's actually just even a worse point for Musashi. Then if Kama before her buff is hitting as hard as she is, that's kind of a yikesy if you get what I'm saying. But understandably, she is a berserker, so that's where they kind of like lower their damage. They don't want them to be like too broken. Although I say that and then they put this guy out there. But yeah, I think I'm pretty satisfied in just saying that I think Kama is better in my opinion, just because she's gonna have a bit more versatility, because they're very similar in what they do, right? They're big boy arts loopers, right? And they both do that job very well. It's just Kama is a bit more modern, so they gave her, all the different bells and whistles that Musashi's not gonna have because she was a bit older, right? Obviously, power creep is a thing, so for Musashi to even be, still being able to be compared with Kama, I think is very good. I think it shows how good she was built and how good she still is. The fact that like she's still comparable to servants that are 3 years after her, because Musashi's summer 3, Kama's summer 6, and Musashi's still comparable, right? There is a discussion to be had. So I think that's really good for Musashi. But I think she just has, a bit too much on Musashi. Like if these were both on rate up, I'd probably tell people to go for Kama Avenger. But it would be hard because again, Musashi's very, very good and she's very solid in her ability to just like fully loop back her NP. But let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. I'm very curious to see what you guys think about this one. But yeah, with all that being said, I think I'm gonna go ahead and get out of here. You guys have yourselves a nice day. Peace, late guys.